which is on the stories behind tiger conservation. Gargi, Rawat, and Latika Nath in conversation with Deshdeep Saxena. Raghav Chandra ji will also be a part of this conversation. The tiger is an iconic species. Tiger conservation attempts to prevent the animals from being extinct and preserving its natural habitat. Project Tiger started in 1973. It is a major effort to conserve the tiger and its habitats in India. Let's welcome Gargi Rawat ji. She's a senior news anchor and environment reporter who has worked with NDTV 24/7 for the last 2 decades. For many years, she has been a regular face on the channel and has filmed several documentaries and environment-related programs. She worked on the first ever news show on wildlife in India, Born Wild, and anchored its Hindi version as well, which is Safari India, for the Hindi channel NDTV India. She has just released her first book, Tiger Season, a work of fiction which has themes of tiger conservation and environmental concerns. She has received widespread acclaim for her award-winning documentary series on the state of the river Ganga. Joining her on the dais, we have Dr. Latika Nath. She's the first Indian to do a doctorate on tiger. That deserves a huge round of applause. She has lived and worked in MP for almost 30 plus years. She started her work as an academician and worked as a consultant in various national and international organizations, including IUCN, UNDP, UNFPA, and ICI MOD, on the environment and wildlife. The session would be moderated by Mr. Deshdeep Saxena, an author, journalist, and political commentator. Mr. Saxena has been in the profession for the past over 3 decades. He has an enduring interest in wildlife and environment. He has also authored a book on the tiger crisis, Breathless, Haunted and Hounded. The tiger runs for its life. He is also a blogger and writes regularly for the wildlifeindia.com. Joining them, we have Raghav Chandra ji. He is the president of the Society for Culture and Environment and director of Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. From the IAS, he has been Secretary Government of India, and before that, Chairman National Highways Authority of India. He has written extensively on management and infrastructure issues. He is the author of the novels Scent of a Game, Kali's Daughter, and has edited the book Eternal Wisdom of the Tribes. He is on the managing committee of the Delhi Golf Club and writes a column for Business World magazine. He has master's degree from Delhi University and Harvard University, USA. We are honored to have you all here. May I please request you to please unfold the conversation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Right? Is it okay? So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. After a heavy dose of economy, now let us proceed to environment and wildlife to have a fresh whip of air. So, another exciting evening of this wonderful Bhopal Literature Festival. I'm joined by, she has already introduced, the 2 talented ladies and Mr. Raghav Chandra. So, I think let's get started. When I was going through your book, Gargi, there are many characters, but one of the characters is Zalim, Save Zalim campaign. But before asking a question about Zalim, let me put things into perspective. Zalim is a tiger in her book, antagonized villagers, attacked cattle, became a cattle lifter and attacked villagers. So people wanted to remove Zalim from that park where where the novel revolves. So what is happening in India is after a successful 50 years of Project Tiger, the conservation program in India is facing a problem of plenty. You know, we have plenty of tigers in some areas, but there are still some tiger reserves and national parks which are bereft of tigers. The population is very low. So if I give you one example of, Tadoba Andhari area, about 5 lakh population is jostling for space with as many as 100 tigers. And it is one of the major flashpoints of man-animal conflict. This area is on the edge of Tadoba National Park, and it's called Brahmapuri Tiger Forest Division. People there just hate tigers. In 2022, there were as many as 55 deaths related to tiger attacks. Cattle lifting cases alag the. And as many as 14-15 tigers also died. So, there are frequent cases when villagers want tigers to be removed. Whenever there is a case of tiger attacking a villager or lifting a cattle, villagers would want it to be removed. Maharashtra government is facing a typical problem. They hardly have any space now to, to place tigers after capturing from the jungle. Now, with this background, let me ask you now. So, you saved Zalim, from being displaced from the jungle. Tell viewers about, audience about this story. How did you go ahead with the novel? What
All
leads
right.
to this?
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for having me here during this literature festival. I just want to start by saying that Raghav ji, many years ago, I released his book. I moderated the session then, and who would have thought that many years later, I would have written my own book featuring with the theme of tiger conservation, and you're with me today on this session as well. So yes, my book is about this aspect of conservation, man-animal conflict, and tiger attacks. And the tiger does get removed. He gets removed to a zoo or some sort of a park area away from this national park that I've created in my novel. So my purpose of writing this book was also so that people who read it, and many people in cities love going to tiger parks and taking those photographs, but they don't really understand what man-animal conflict entails. They always talk about, oh, save the tiger, and without really having any empathy for the people who live around tiger parks, as well as the forest department that does so much to protect the tigers, as well as have to deal with angry villagers and all sorts of conflict situations in which very often they also are attacked. So the spark for writing this book was an episode that happened near Ranthambore with this particular tiger, Ustad T24, and he killed a forest guard. And this was the second forest personnel who he had killed. And overnight, the forest department there decided this is a problem tiger. Yes, we do have problem tigers, and he needs to be removed. And they moved him to Udaipur, to a park there. But it just sparked this sort of protest in many cities. There were these candlelight vigils in Bangalore, in Lucknow, in Delhi, etc., in which people came onto the street saying, "Save Ustad! You're removing him from his home, which we have invaded," etc., etc. While it was all very nice to have people who are so passionate about tigers, so much so that they come out onto the street, I was just astounded at the absolute lack of sympathy for the forest department, the forester who died, the villagers who lived there, because Ustad used to regularly, come into the villages as well and lift cattle, etc. And if you speak to any conservationist, any scientist who's worked there, they tell you remove a problem animal, because saving tigers is not just about a particular tiger. It's also about the entire ecosphere. It's about the park as well as the people living around the park, the villagers. You need their support. They have to be a part of the conservation. They have to feel it benefits them, because let's face it, we are a very poor country. I know you just had a conversation about 5 trillion to 10 trillion, etc., but we are very poor. For a poor farmer, his goat getting picked up or his cow getting picked up is huge. So we need to work to sort of come in there, help them, assist them, have a stake in tourism, have a stake in conservation that has to benefit them without being so antagonistic. So I had reported on the Ustad episode at that time, and I was heavily trolled on social media by all these, tiger lovers, etc., who were like, you're siding with the lodges. They found all kinds of reasons to kind of explain why I was in favor of removing this tiger. But so my book, I suppose, it is an answer to that, and also it's an adventure. There's a little romance, there's a little Bollywood, but there's also conservation, and I hope people who read it, who may not know so much about tiger conservation, come to understand and empathize with everything that goes into it. And next time you hear of a tiger attack and you're going to become this social media warrior and say, oh no, save this tiger, please understand you have to also have empathy for the people living around there. So this was my little way of trying to put that message across.
But the problem is spreading in more and more jungles, in more and more national parks. Recently, I'll just. Recently, tiger was removed from Bandhavgarh National Park. Then in Kana, you must have heard. Kana, though, they insisted that the villagers wanted to see the tiger, which was captured. And when they were not, when they refused to show the pinjra where tiger was captured, the villagers attacked the forest department official. So it's not a simple problem.
No, it's not a simple problem, and I'd like to address this a little more holistically. The reality is that we made a commitment to protect the tiger, and we also stated that we would double the population of tigers in the country, which we did very successfully. And it was a one-sided, blinkered approach, and the goal was to get that number, the magic number. There was absolutely no focus on what the consequence of that double tiger population would be given the situation in India today. We have not done adequate research on improving the carrying capacity of national parks. We have not estimated what is going to happen with the youngsters that move out of national parks looking for territories. We have not understood that there is the fear of man was a taught behavior. And because there has been no hunting and these tigers have grown up in a protected environment for several generations, they are losing their fear of humans. And they are unlearning the fear of man. And this is being seen more and more in parks like Corbett, in areas like Chandrapur, in the Tadoba landscape, where this is an issue. We have the same thing happening with leopards in many parts of the country. So the government now needs to come up with a new plan. We need to address the issue of what we're going to do with these growing numbers of animals. We need to address the issue of dispersal of these animals. We need to figure out new ways to teach these animals to keep their distance from humans. And for this, we can come up with innovative solutions. We need to understand that citizen science is essential. And it's an important and integral component of every wildlife conservation program run by the government. So participation of citizens and stakeholders is something that we do need to focus on. So this is a very complex issue. It's no longer an issue of debating whether we're doing development or we're talking about environment. These are two parallel tracks, and they have to be done parallelly to enable the country to progress. So I think our thought process needs to change.
Yes, true. And about 35% of tiger population in India lives outside the national park. And so, Raghavji, I would like you to answer one question. You have written a book also, The Scent of Tiger, right? So it's about man-animal conflict also. And the tiger corridors, when we talk about that dispersal of tiger, she said, tiger needs to be dispersed from one national park to other. And when the moment it comes out of the national park, survives for some time till the prey base is available, then either it is posed, electrocuted, killed in some or other way. So what is the way out then?
Yeah, it's a very, very relevant question. But before that, I must applaud both the ladies here for their wonderful answers to these very, very difficult, complex questions. And you've handled them with great, sensitivity. And I fully agree with the approach that you've talked of a very rational, a very well thought through policy. It does require a lot of thinking through. For instance, the wildlife resorts such as Pench, Kana, Achanak Marg, they need to be connected. That corridor, which was a historical or a natural passage for the tiger to roam through freely, that has been usurped by human beings, by all of us, by building little townships and such like. That passage needs to be, carved out afresh so that there are adequate tracts for tigers to roam around freely in those areas. Government will agree to do that only when it sees that it is compensated adequately. And for that, the government itself must come up with a suitable tourism plan, of eco-tourism plan or a tiger tourism plan, something which is not just related to Pench or giving away, leasing out land in Tadoba or Kana or Bandhavgarh to a few hotels or a few resorts. It needs to be a comprehensive strategy where we can say that, look, this is what we are doing by connecting these, these are the tiger corridors we are connecting. This is how we connect them, whether Tadoba and all can be also connected or not. This is the landing strip for the planes. This is where, tourists can be taken to see them. And we will not allow any construction or any residential habitats to develop along those passageways. Where government wants to do, it can do. As for instance, in the Sivni-Pench elevated corridor that they built on the national highway to, when there was a movement that tigers would, their movement would get hampered, government spent some 700 crores or 600 crores to build. Not willingly, and it took many, many years. And ultimately, because Gadkari ji is from Nagpur, because the pressure was huge, the courts got involved, finally it's been done. But that's just one component, an elevated corridor. It needs to be a very, very comprehensive strategy where we've got to think through and say that, look, this is our 20,000 crore tiger development plan, and our objective is to recover it over 10 years or 15 years, and we'll get tourists from foreign tourists to land there directly. We'll create this many resorts, 5-star resorts, this many 4-star resorts. So that's my little take on it, that it needs to be a very comprehensive strategy, and government has to think it through.
I'd like to just, before you add to it, because end of the day, let's face it, across the world, people love tigers. You have children sitting in Scandinavia, if they're asked, what is your favorite animal? They'll say tiger, they'll draw a tiger. They've never seen a tiger, they've only watched it on TV. Where are the tigers of the world found? In India, we have, 70-80% of the world's wild tiger population. I mean, this is the only country, despite all our challenges and poverty, that we have managed to create these safe spaces, managed to save a population of tigers and have them, do so well. And so definitely, I think tourism for a very long time, when I started reporting some, 15, 20 odd years ago, tourism was like this bad word when it came to tiger conservation. It's like, oh, we don't want to be commercial. It's like a very pure sort of purpose of saving tigers, and let's not mix the two. But I think there has been a lot of change in thought, hopefully, and hopefully more can be done to make tourism something. When we talk about, again, I'm coming back to your previous conversation about this many trillion economy. I mean, tourism is one of those places we can really attract a lot of people, and if it's done the right way, it could help the locals as well and improve their, their situation. I know, Latika, you have more to add on that.
We'll pick up this issue of tourism.
I'm not talking about tourism.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to put two new thoughts in your head. Yes, tourism is really important. Livelihood generation is really important. But for the government now, we need to start thinking about getting help from the economists to look at two things for India. One is the value of ecosystem services that are generated by the habitats that are critical for our wildlife. Okay, so we need a quantification for that, and we need the government to feel that they are benefiting in terms of a realistic number from ecosystem services that are generated by these habitats. And the other is that we need the planet as a whole to recognize that we, by having this much forest cover in our country and the immense amount of biodiversity, are actually contributing to the benefit of the planet and fighting climate change. And we should get carbon credits, which are, you know, something that we can trade in across the world. And I think when this happens, then and only then will the government take this really seriously. So, two thoughts that I wanted to share.
That's a fantastic idea, and we need to do that. Going back to that, picking up tigers from one national park to another, you know, till 2 years ago, you know, there were 33 tiger reserves in India, which had very less number of tigers. So there are tiger reserves overflowing with tiger population, and there are tiger reserves which hardly have any tiger population. There are some tiger reserves which don't have any tiger, like Baksa and you know, one or two more. Valmiki, there are tigers.
Believe,
Yeah, where man-animal conflict is, I mean, a higher rate in the Tarai Arc area. Where, so, do you think that government should also, you know, come up with this idea of picking up tigers from one national park to the national parks where there's hardly any tiger population?
Okay, there's two thoughts on this. Yes, this is something that we can definitely do. We can repopulate areas, but there have been studies, and we had an in-depth discussion recently with Dr. Vidya Athreya, who's worked on problem leopards that were translocated. And they discovered that problem animals become even more problematic when they're moved out from their territory to strange territories. So we do need behavioral scientists to actually come in and analyze how we can do this. What we can do in the meantime is to have really large enclosed spaces in the national parks that have low populations, because there we can give the animals that are supposed to be now removed from the wild and kept in confined spaces in larger, better confined spaces. So maybe, you know, of 10 square kilometer spaces in a national park. But all of this is stuff that we need to actually study, and we need more data on. And we don't have this data, and we haven't got the support yet from the government to do studies like this. So we do need to do this to have all these answers.
So we need to look at the tiger conservation with an altogether different
absolutely, tiger and
approach.
leopard, both. Yes, the big cats. Yes, a totally new way of looking at things.
So let's pick up this tourism now, which is, you know, a very, very important factor in tiger conservation also. You talked about some, you know, the lodge in your book and how people were coming there, visiting the national park. So how, you know, people in general and the villages around can be connected with this tourism thing?
Right. So, I mean, this was one lodge, and I created it out of experience with many different parks in Bandhavgarh, in Corbett, etc. I've seen these, you know, sort of the lodges and the promoters and this whole how it all comes together in terms of managing the local populations and the politics with the forest department and conflict and how they can help. So when we talk about tourism in, you know, in tiger conservation, we've already spoken how it can be a tool. Also, I'd just like to add here that I'm lucky that I got a chance to report this much on these issues, because in NDTV, you know, we always gave it a lot of space, and we had these very popular tiger campaigns that we did when the numbers were 14, 11. I think everybody remembers that when we started our campaign. And it's important that the media also report on these issues, and I think that also comes out in the book because it, the kind of situation that is there, it harks back to an earlier time in India, in the country, when the media had time to do these long format stories that matter, stories that could make a difference. Right now, we're all caught up with the 9 o'clock news and whatever the latest fight and sensational sort of issues are. But this is where, I mean, the media could be responsible and do a lot more, like the national highway between Pench that is on an elevated road. I know how long it took, how much reportage we did, how much activism people did on the ground, and we gave them that platform that finally, after many years, they paid that extra hundreds and however many crores it cost to make these elevated highways. Nowadays, I'm not sure if one can report that much on these projects or be very negative about them. That space, sadly, has shrunk to, I think, mainly online. Yes, so coming back to the resorts, etc., as Raghavji was saying, that you can have plans, resorts can employ people. I've been to various resorts that actually make it a policy to make sure that they hire people from the local population. I've actually seen one young man, he was, I think he was a Gujar from the Corbett area, and he had been sent for wine tasting by the particular resort so he could serve the guests, and it was quite interesting to see that, and in terms and taxi driving, etc. There's so much, and guides, and so this thing needs to be thought of. Homestays, I think around Gir you have a lot of homestays, in Corbett as well you have a lot of homestays. So all sorts of things can be promoted by the government to ensure that the local population also benefits from tiger tourism, and they don't have this sort of and any wildlife tourism, frankly, and don't have any sort of antagonism towards this.
That's exactly this thing, except that I'd like to augment that by saying that what I'm really envisaging and positing for the government's reflection is something like a tiger zone, a special tiger zone, which is all along the tiger corridor. And Latika, you as a tiger expert would perhaps be able to say whether such, I mean, administratively it is feasible. It requires a lot of effort, but that kind of expenditure and that kind of allocation of resources is possible only if it comes as part of a larger economic or tourism plan, not a fragmented one where you're looking at just 5 kilometers square. You're looking at giving it a passage all across and then allowing selected areas in that, creating the requisite infrastructure, which will mean also a connectivity where cars can go, because after all, tourists also need to use cars, but also providing the requisite segregation, and so that tigers can coexist and yet go across, and to create habitations. So you need to relocate people, but rather than relocate in the buffer zone or outside the buffer zone, just to relocate along a certain pathway or along a certain corridor, so that they can then be gainfully utilized for the tourism activities. So it's a, it has to be a complete blueprint of has to be prepared, and I think perhaps, I mean, that is feasible, but it has to have a very high level of enterprise and determination on the part of the government and the tourism department and the environment ministry to think of it as a national venture which will have international positivity.
Can
I?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Okay. So tourism. I have 2 or 3 things that I need to say about this. While tourism is a great idea, mass tourism can lead to the death of a destination. And the government is simply not acknowledging this fact. Our urban and town planning and rural development plans do not understand what the impacts of mass tourism are on a region. And the other truth that we need to live with is the fact that there is no way that we can plan for our natural resources and our wilderness spaces to be open to 1 billion people. They just can't withstand that pressure. So yes, we have to restrict the number of people going in. There's no 2 ways about that. We need to control the quality of accommodation providers. We need to understand how we're going to deal with waste. We have to understand demands for water and electricity, energy, where the food is going to come from into these areas. We need to understand that if you have a park which allows you to take 500 people into the park on a given day, you cannot have accommodation for 30,000 people outside the park. It doesn't work. So if India has to stand up to the world and say, we are the best destination for wildlife tourism, we need to ensure that the quality of experience we provide is commensurate with world standards. And this is something that we're just not talking about enough. So the minute you improve the quality of your experience, you have to train your people better, they get higher wages, you get more support from local communities. If local communities have to deal with hordes of tourists coming in and taking over their landscape, and they're then obligatory, sales of lands to people who want to make, pitiful resorts. They lose prime agricultural land. All sorts of things happen. So we need to, as a nation, understand and take a decision on what we're doing and how we're doing it. Yeah? Deshdeep.
So economy again seems to be taking over the environment.
Yes.
So let me talk about some other aspects of tiger and tiger conservation. Your book, it talks about Bari Mada, how it disappeared.
In the story, yes.
Story, yes. So poaching still contributes, to, it is one of the major reasons of the present-day tiger crisis. There are international gangs operating from a small national park, how tiger body or tiger parts goes out to China or Far East countries, European countries, America. You talked in detail about your book. So let the audience know about
Well,
how did you...
I have spoken about, and this was a book which was set in 2006, just for your this thing, and you all are experts. So 2006 was the year where Manmohan Singh ordered an inquiry through the CBI of all the things, because tigers vanished from Sariska. And even in Madhya Pradesh, I remember that is the period 2006, 2007. Every time I would come back from a game of badminton from a Rera club in the morning, the first thing in the newspapers was tiger killed here, tiger killed there, somebody ran over a tiger, somebody electrocuted a tiger. So I was fascinated by the tiger story and I wrote about it. In a very pedantic sort of way, I've looked at the history of tiger poaching, the shikar by the Maharajas and things like that. I've written, not really fictional way. I've converted non-fiction into fiction, so it's like that. There's one nugget which I want to mention, which will be of great interest to the audience here, because you mentioned about my book, and is that about taxidermy as it used to take place in the earlier days when tigers and leopards and elephants and various wildlife was being killed in a big way in India by the British. King George V came and, he had thousands of elephants and he managed to kill a couple of tigers. There are pictures of him and Queen Elizabeth standing with Lord Mountbatten, after a tiger hunt and all that. So coming back to this taxidermy company, which I had heard of as a child, because my father had no clue, but somebody had presented him a leopard skin or something which eventually disappeared, from a company he said was Fanningen and Fanningen. So thanks to the Google and the internet, I was able to research that, and it turned out to be a company called Vanningen and Vanningen, which was located in Mysore. They were the largest taxidermists in India. And so their history said, and their account book said, they operated between 1899 and 1999. So that's 100 years. In that 100 years, they stuffed something like 50,000 tigers. So, and an equivalent or maybe 100,000 leopards. So if they stuffed so many, so you can imagine how many were actually killed, because for Rajas, Maharajas, the British to be able to send their trophies all the way to Mysore would have costed so much. So, and that's in their account books. And they were the biggest taxidermists here, like, you know, Roland Ward of England and various others like that. So I've related the story of Badi Mada who disappears and brought in a lot of karma and all that into how this person who had his father's tiger skin manages to save tigers and is thereby redeemed and finds redemption and is saved by tigers again.
When I was researching, when I was writing my book, during my research, I came to know that tigers in Far East countries, in China, it is marinated like chicken. Bones are glued. You know. So another important, interesting aspect.
Tiger wine also.
Tiger wine, yes. The traditional Chinese medicines.
And not just China, I think several Eastern countries, there's this demand, and that's India's tigers go there to, you know, feed this demand of medicines and various aphrodisiacs and all sorts of Chinese medicine, yes.
So another interesting aspect, do you know how, I don't know how many of you know about Latika ji. She is known as Tiger Princess of India. And for an hour-long program produced by Nat Geo, so let them know something more about it. How
oh gosh. Okay, no, this was just a strange thing. I was doing my PhD on tigers, and this was a long time ago. I did my research from 92 to 99, got my PhD in the year 2000. And when I was at Oxford, National Geographic realized that there was this woman in India who had done a doctorate on tigers from the University of Oxford under the very famous carnivore ecologist, Professor David MacDonald. And by the way, I was a friend of mine who did her PhD same time as me at Oxford is somebody who's been responsible for changing history in India, Dr. Laurie Marker, the person who brought cheetahs in. Laurie and I were colleagues. We did our doctorates at the same time. And National Geographic approached me to do this film, and it was about my work and my research and what I was doing in India. So that was the 1-hour film. But yeah, that was a long time ago. Yes.
So that's an interesting aspect.
Yes.
Let's take some questions. We are just on time.
So I was actually, listening to that poaching thing while we're taking the question, and I was in China recently, and I was interacting with some people there, and it just leaves you gobsmacked at the arrogance with which they say, yes, we farm tigers. And there are farms of tigers. China has more tigers in farms than we can imagine. And they're farmed, and there's literally like, when you go into these farms, there's like a canal with, 50 tigers sitting in it.
Yes,
and they farm them, and they use them for Chinese traditional medicine. And it's something that's done openly. When I was with the Global Tiger Forum, I was, I've been involved with several of these things. And this is an issue that as a country we need to deal with. And I don't know how, but it's something that it's a fight, and it's an ongoing fight, and we need ever greater support from people and the government.
I think more films on tigers also. Maybe there's so many interesting aspects when you go into a tiger behavior and you've studied about tigers. I remember in Ranthambore there was this very interesting story about how this tigress, she was ailing and the forest department was tracking her. She had cubs and she died. But they didn't know where the cubs had gone, and that's always the fear when the tigress dies, that the cubs are going to, disappear. But they couldn't find them anywhere, and then suddenly one day they see these pug marks of a male tiger and smaller marks of like cubs, and then they realized the father was actually protecting the cubs, and he was training them in a sense to hunt, etc. and all. And I think the forest department also helped in some way. But that's very interesting because you don't see that usually, and it's just like a different sort of tiger behavior to have the father actually, because the
generally
male tigers never really
generally
involved.
Mothers who do it.
Yes, so that was, so there's so many, and behavior that, needs to be looked at. And in Madhya Pradesh, this is the tiger state. I know there's that Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh fight with who's the tiger state, but Madhya Pradesh is, in a sense, has been the tiger state for so long.
And there's nothing official in Tiger State.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. So yes, and Collar Wali was such a famous tiger. So
Yes.
isn't that something that we need to know more about the secret lives of tigers?
Absolutely.
And these stories, who made these stories? The gypsy
Researchers,
walas.
yeah.
Most of the time, it's the gypsy walas, the drivers,
Yeah, yeah.
come out with interesting tiger stories. And
And
even
the
the
old
naming,
mahouts.
even
And the mahouts.
and the mahouts, yeah.
Yes, the mahouts also, and of course, lots of the forest department people who work day and night in the field, they're absolute treasure trove of knowledge on behavior. So I think we need to acknowledge all of these men and women who are working tirelessly in the forests and protecting our wildlife. I think that's, we need to give a big shout out for them also.
That reminds me, you also raised this issue in your book about the grassroots staff, the hardships faced by them.
Right, absolutely. And when we did our tiger campaign at NDTV, we did a telethon, and the purpose was to raise money. Many people pledged money, and we used that money for in various parks for the staff to help in their, the chowkis, because. And I put this in the book as well. I remember speaking to one of the guards, and I said, "What is the most difficult, aspect of your day?" And they patrol with a danda. They literally go out and they're just with a stick, and he's like, everything is fine. What's the worst thing is when I come back to the chowki in the middle of the park, away from family for weeks on end, is that I have to go to the river, get some water, then I have to boil, then I have to do this, I have to chop, whatever. Very rudimentary sort of arrangements were there, and that's so sad. At the end of the day, working so hard, and then there was very little sort of thing there for their own comfort. So I feel that one must appreciate them more, also have more, they get attacked. I remember, and it was in Bandhavgarh, I think one of them got attacked by a bear and mauled, and then another forest guard had to take him on a motorcycle out because it's so far away, and finally.
And they're unsung heroes,
all
basically.
this sort of thing.
They're unsung heroes.
Absolutely, yeah. So and in my book, that's another aspect I want to just draw attention to, that to appreciate.
And it's very important
the forest guards and the foresters who work so hard and take on poachers also, or whatever else they have to do.
And these days they have to face this timber mafia.
Yes.
And the poachers right inside the forest.
Mining,
so life is even
timber,
more difficult.
Mining mafia,
Yes.
timber mafia. Bamboo extraction. Yes, there's so much that they have to take on, and it's just to protect these parks that we all love to go to.
Apart from service politics.
Yes.
Climate change and forest fires is a big issue now, all over the world, and this includes India. We've got, in states like Madhya Pradesh, where Mahua time people set fires, and that's a dry season. We have so much problem with forest fires, and so many animals and so many people have lost their lives to this. And then I think it's really important that we acknowledge that also.
So let's take some questions from
And I think I also just want to say finally that, news also, you've reported on environment, I've reported, my colleague Anurag is here, we've all reported on these issues, and unfortunately the space has shrunk. These are issues that earlier used to be of great importance. We used to talk to ministers, we used to go and try to interview them, we used to ask them questions about environment, tigers, Falana dam, Falana mining and all. Now, of course, you can't ask any minister anything. No secretary will talk to you. It's very difficult, it's all opaque, and it's difficult doing those stories anymore.
You are lucky, Gargi, working with NDTV. I was working with a news channel, from 2003 to 8. I won't name the channel. I was raising the issue of Panna National Park, 1 story, 2 story, 3rd story. After 4th story, he said, "Kya Discovery Channel bana rahe ho kya hamare channel?"
So it's very important.
Yeah, please.
Hello. I'm Shantanu, and I am deeply interested in wildlife. I just wanted to ask a very weird question, that why save the tiger? Are we copying the international trend? Like, for example, the Britishers took away the right of tribals. We continued that. The Nehru government continued that. Like in 72, Mrs. Gandhi signed international agreements, and we took away the forest to the collateral list from the state list. So are we just copying? Is everything a number game? For example, in Simlipile, tigers are inbreeding, And we have one tiger more than Karnataka, so we are the tiger.
It's not a number game. Latika ji will answer.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. It's something I'm asked often. Please understand, we don't only protect the tiger. We protect the tiger. We have a project tiger. We have a project elephant. We have a project rhino. We have projects to protect, marine mammals. We have projects to protect now mesopredators, which are the smaller cats. Each one of these species has been selected because it is a charismatic mega species, which is the top of the food chain. By protecting that animal and all its habitat, you protect everything that happens under that umbrella. So in India, for instance, over 300 rivers originate from tiger habitats. If the tiger goes, and the leopard goes, and the elephant goes, there is more threat to convert these forest lands into something else. The very water security of our nation is threatened. And after the fuel wars, the next thing that's going to be an essential commodity on earth is fresh water. Also, we have a population of cattle that is huge in this country. Fodder comes from these same spaces. So you're also addressing the needs of a very rural population in this country. We have a tradition of Ayurveda in this country. And much of the medicinal plants and the wild genetic gene pool is from these same regions. So you're not just protecting the tiger. You're using the tiger because it captures your imagination and the imagination of the common person to say that to fight global warming, to guard against climate change, to guard against drought, to ensure that we find new medicines and new cures, to find food for all of the hundreds of thousands of animals that are in our rural landscapes, we need these spaces. That is why we protect the tiger.
No, so, I mean, obviously everything Latika said there, and I understand what you're pointing about, tribals and all that have been moved out of these spaces in the past. Yes, I think we all must recognize that there was this very unsung sacrifice made by these tribals. I've been to Ranthambore and Bandhavgarh where they point out, yahan pe gaon tha, logon ke, temples the, whatever, everybody was moved out at that time. It was very heavy-handed. And yes, I think we must appreciate that. But today, I mean, as you said, this is, even now you have development projects that are being talked about in Tiger Park. So you can imagine if we take away that protection, what will happen.
Okay, yeah, Rawat.
Hi, my name is Rahul. My question is, a large part of the, substantial part of the literature and the writing in India on wildlife in the past has been about shikar stories. And some of the most popular as well, if it's Cobbett or Kenneth Anderson or Hugh Allen or Bulu Imam. That option is not available right now. I mean, it's not coming.
Shikar option?
No, writing on that. I mean, those stories are.
Story option.
So how easy or difficult is it to write something which will be widely read in the absence of that option? How does one make that story interesting or,
all right, interesting. Yes, so,
my question's about writing on.
Right, I get that. There are all these other books on tigers, which are the factual books, research books, etc. And, there's so many people who love tigers, conservationists, and everybody who reads those books. My book is, it was a challenge, but as I said in the beginning, the spark was that whole Ustad episode, and I wanted to put across this perspective. And those who know tiger conservation and all the issues know it, so there's no need for me to tell them about this. That's why I kind of wrote this fictional book, which is a bit of adventure, romance. There's a Bollywood campaign, which we've also done at NDTV, used Bollywood for Save the Tigers, etc. So I put that in there to make it fun, and I hope people who may not be that into tigers or conservation or wildlife issues will read the book and also understand a bit of, the various issues involved. So yes, it is challenging. I've tried my best, and thank you, Raghavji, for giving me this platform to, talk about it a bit more.
And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So all our books have sold out. I'd asked for 6 copies to be brought here, but there's only 1 left, unfortunately. So
that's good to know, and encourages me to perhaps write more on this issue.
And we can have the climate change angle also vis-a-vis tiger, The
Bhattacharya Sahab, Principal Chief
Sorry.
Conservator Forest.
Yeah, please, Bhattacharya.
Next time I'll sit on the right side, because right side, sitting on the right side, get preference. Thank you. Hello, Latika, it's wonderful to see you here. And from what you narrate, the importance of tiger in the whole ecosystem, I think the tiger reserve should be called as wildlife reserves. So actually we are working for carbon credit in 2 tiger reserves, Kana and Pench. So we are expecting to extend the carbon credit to the eco-development committees, that, the communities which are directly the frontline staff were responsible for the conservation. So before I go ahead, I'll just share some quick points. So I'll raise 3 questions for all of us and to answer to ourselves. First, what is difference between protection and conservation? Second, what is wildlife? And third, what is the difference between wildlife reserves and the tiger reserves? And last is, what is tiger conservation and versus forest conservation? So you have been discussing that. So let's take 30 seconds and then we come to that. The first is question, difference between protection and conservation. Okay? So most of the even our foresters, wildlifers, they probably don't know or confused between protection and conservation. And so that's why we are not able to protect whatever we want to protect. In India, we have Wildlife Protection Act. In most of the other countries, we have Wildlife Conservation Act. So conservation is protection plus utilization. So you mentioned about the ecosystem services that is included in the utilization. Since we ignore utilization, so we are unable to protect. So we are unable to conserve. That's one point. Second is wildlife. In all the all the gatherings, all the interaction with the students, the officers, I ask 3 persons, tell me 3 wildlife, and 10 persons. So all of them will speak out what? Wild animals, not wildlife. Not a single person will name any plant. So wildlife is both plant and animals. So we are ignoring plants in the botany, in wildlife definition, wildlife management. And third is the wildlife, tiger reserves versus wildlife reserves. So our focus is on tiger. So if we protect forest, tiger will be protected. So there are examples where if we have ignored forest protection, we have ignored forest conservation, and the tigers have vanished. So I will prefer to call all tiger reserves as wildlife reserves rather than tiger reserves. And if we protect, our focus is on the forest protection, the intensive forest protection, the ecosystem protection, the tigers will be automatically conserved. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Last question? Anyone else?
So we can close this session.
Yes.
We can formally
The Tiger Season by Gargi Rawat ji. Congratulations on the sold out, ma'am.
Deshdeep is also an author of a book on tigers, no, by the way.
It was launched in 2020 and from this
That would-
platform only. Thank you so much, Raghav. Thank you so much, Gargi and Latika.
That
Thank
was
you so
a
much.
very insightful session. Now, may I please request Mr. Pandey, Principal Chief Conservation Forest, to please come forward and felicitate our panelists with a memento, which is a symbol of our love, respect, and gratitude. The memento, ladies and gentlemen, is also the mascot of Bhopal Literature Festival 2024. It is a gone painting by the senior most gone artist, Ram Singh Urvati ji. It's a very beautiful motif which depicts evolution of life. Our next session is about to start in a few minutes, so I'd like to inform the audience to please be seated. If anyone has some questions, you can always find our authors at the author signing desk. Thank you so much.